once again, and I just noticed something, Jay, as we set this up here. It gives me an option to do standard resolution, 720p, and I didn't click the drop down. I wonder if there's a high def option that we're missing out on just by not clicking it on the drop down.
Well, click on the drop down.
Well, it's too late now because we went live already. We want to abort the live stream and try again, or just try it for next week.
Um,
We're on
does
now.
it show the drop down?
No. It all disappeared once the live stream started. This is before I clicked go live.
Um, I don't know. What do we want to do? Do we want to try it?
And I don't even know, by the way, if it's going to be populated with high def. All I saw was a standard one on there. I'm
Right,
surprised
right.
it didn't default to high def if I had that option, right? I would default to the standard definition.
Who knows? We could try it next week.
All right, we'll try it next time.
But
So
we'll try it after this. We'll hang it up,
yeah,
finish and then take a look at it.
like kids in a candy store, right? Trying something new. So I am Mike Scala. As I said, this is Nuance, and we're going to be speaking of TikTok and it's the possibility that it gets banned in the US as an appeal is ongoing. And I want to get into some of the arguments that were raised. Of course, I'm joined as always by Jay Carter, also known as Timid, the hip hop artist in the chair of BLM Tokyo, featuring on the new single Handcuffs with yours truly. What's going on, Jay?
Yes, yes, yes. I'm all right. Like I said earlier, trying to take small breaths because they're painting the apartment building, and so there's like paint fumes here. So I'm gonna be dipping out after this to find a place to chill for the afternoon, so I don't have to breathe in these toxins.
Okay. Okay. Afternoon. Time zones are all crazy. I'm trying to think how is it okay because it's the morning for you now, so it really is
Yeah,
a different day. We put out that video on TikTok. It just turned Friday, but that was Friday morning, as in midnight New York, afternoon for you. It was still both on Friday, right? But now we're
right.
talking Tuesday in the U.S. and Wednesday morning in Japan.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, they could be crazy. So yeah, that's what's going on here. And I'm officially marking myself safe from Diddy's 1,000 bottles of baby oil.
Okay, yeah, that was crazy, right? And the AK-47s, allegedly.
Thousand and narcotics too. Like it's
Yeah, and I heard something
wow.
about pink cocaine. Did I hear that right? Pink cocaine found in the
I
hotel room.
I did not see that. Like how would you make a pink cocaine?
Yeah, food coloring. I don't know. And then there's the freak off. Is that what they called it? The freak
Yeah,
off.
he got the freak off.
Oh goodness, goodness gracious.
Listen, I'm gonna reiterate again the same thing as when he was first accused.
Mm-hmm.
I've only been to one Diddy event in New York. Didn't leave the venue. This was a public venue. I
Yeah.
was not involved in any freak offs or baby oils or anything like
Well,
that.
you were rapping at the New York City Marathon
Right.
the year that he ran it, I believe. So technically, he was at that event. Although I don't think we saw him when we were on stage.
Right. And I'm just realizing the event that I went to, I think it was a release party or something,
Mm.
but it was at a club in the meatpacking district. So that doesn't really.
All right, so let's get this out the way. If the allegations are true, we have to say that if, right? Because
Right.
I'm an attorney. I have to maintain that at all times, that integrity. If the allegations are true, Diddy certainly gets the rubber chicken of the week for this behavior.
They said there was a lot of paraphernalia in there. He might have his own rubber chicken.
Oh my goodness.
So,
I mean, yeah, I'm
it's
sure we'll be
wild.
hearing a lot of jokes about the late night comics, but it
Yeah.
really isn't too humorous of a subject. Again, if these things are true, right? We're talking about some very serious accusations here.
Very serious. Yeah.
So, all
Very
right, well,
serious
we'll have to
accusations.
again keep an eye on all of that. So, speaking of keeping an eye on things, I've been watching the numbers on this music. I gotta say, I kind of feel like I woke up from a coma and I entered a whole new world when it comes to music marketing, right? Because we mentioned this is the first music I've put out in a very long time. I've still recorded and worked on music, but I never put it out and tried to promote it in a while. And it is a whole different world. I got frustrated. Part of the reason maybe why I stopped back in the day was when people stopped buying album, stopped buying CDs, and things started going to streaming, but people still weren't really streaming, right? We would put stuff up on Spotify in those early years and nothing would be coming through. And it's like, what is the point? And then MySpace went away. Everyone jumped on Facebook, but the whole culture there was you only add people you know in real life, right? You send someone a friend request. Before you accept this person, do you confirm that you know them in real life? They would actually ask you that. And so, as an artist trying to market, trying to promote, trying to grow the fan base, grow the audience, it seemed like a fool's errand at the time, right? It's like you only had to market to the people that you already knew in your life, your friends and family and whatever. But MySpace was so much better for that, right? We didn't really have anything resembling that at the time. And it was disheartening, right? Now,
Right.
since I've checked out for so long, right? I'm looking at this world again, I'm coming into it. And I think really over the past year or so only, things have really changed to be much more friendly to organic discovery for artists to actually grow their audience in a nice way. And maybe we'll talk about TikTok here. Maybe if TikTok goes down, that will start to suffer. But then again, you have other platforms as well trying to emulate kind of that TikTok algorithm in a way. YouTube Shorts, Instagram Reels, etc. And so it seems like this current era of social media is better for artists trying to promote. We talked about obviously still difficult, still challenges. Artists are still getting ripped off when it comes to what they make per stream and all that kind of stuff. But for the first time ever, really, there is data, like real data that you can dive into. That's new to me, right? And again, this is why I say it kind of feels like waking up from a coma. We never had this kind of hard data before. Like if you run an ad and you target your ad to a certain audience and you can see what your cost per click is, and then you can optimize the ad, and then you can say, okay, well, if I scale this one up, now I know approximately how much money it would cost to get this result. And you can really look at these numbers and again target in a way that was just impossible before. And that's exciting to me. So I'm looking at these, I'm looking at the streams, I'm looking at every city where they're coming from. And I'm starting to think, oh, so now if I was going to plan a tour, it wouldn't be like, let me go where I think I might find an audience. No, I know exactly where to go. I got like 80 fans in Helsinki already. Dope. I'm doing a show there for sure. You know what I mean? Like it's really cool now to be able to have all this to go off of. And it's exciting. It's a whole new world. And I'm having a really fun. For the first time in a long time, I'm having fun with this, right? Because like I said, it kind of stopped being fun when MySpace went away and I didn't really know where to go. Now I feel like those MySpace days when I was growing, like every day you can see the plays go up and the friends go up and the feedback come in and all that kind of stuff. I'm feeling that way for the first time and it's really exciting.
Yeah, I mean that's the benefit of digital marketing.
Mm-hmm.
Is the data. That's really the strong part of it. The data that you get, but also the targeting that you can do to increase that data. And like you said, it's good for planning shows, for planning events, or whatever it is. So
Right.
yeah,
Right. You know, we dropped that first single, Bring Ruckus Back with Cool G Rap. So my strategy for that was let me, if I'm going to run ads, target people who are fans of Cool G Rap. It seemed to make sense. And
right.
I did seem to get a pretty high conversion rate by doing that. And now we just dropped a new single, Handcuffs. I'm playing around with something different, right? I'm trying to playlist ad. And that one I'm struggling with a little bit more. Maybe it's a matter of further optimizing it or figuring out the parameters. But what I'm basically doing is trying different things out, different iterations of different things, and collecting this data so that when it's all said and done, I'll be able to look back at all these different things that I tried and be like, oh, okay, of all the different things, this one really seems to work. Now, if I'm going to
Right.
really try to put more money into it or push it harder, I'm going to know where to direct my efforts.
Right. Absolutely.
So.
Absolutely. So
So yeah, let's talk about Handcuffs because we did drop it on Friday. It's available now. It's available everywhere on streaming, right? Spotify, obviously, is the main one, Apple Music, wherever you get your music from. I know someone listens on SoundCloud, so that's great, even though I don't think it's as easy to monetize. But you know,
no, it's not.
people do monetize SoundCloud eventually. I think maybe more recently, again, they started doing that, but
It
um,
takes a while to
it
get
takes,
the
yeah,
monetization up.
yeah. So I'm focusing my efforts mostly on Spotify. I know that not everyone uses it, but it does have the biggest market share of the streaming market, right? So that's where I'm directing my efforts. And I think when people are looking at an artist's success rate in the industry, at least, they tend to go to Spotify first. Like how many monthlies you got? How many, you know what I mean? So
Right.
I've been trying to focus there. But we are going to drop the video. I guess there's an exclusive announcement. We're dropping the video for Handcuffs on Friday. And so that'll be on YouTube. And I'm going to be trying to direct some traffic to that YouTube video as well and see what that does, right? Because I think that's the kind of song, I guess this could be the tie into the song. It's the kind of song that maybe performs better visually than just
Yeah.
in audio.
I think that the visual will help, definitely, because it's it's very story driven. The song Handcuffs is very story driven. It's not just like, I got my this, I got my that. It's giving a imagery, right, of two different types of individuals and interacting, or how the interactions play out. And so it's yeah, I think the visuals are really helpful in that regard.
Right, right. It's a story, and of course, I'm playing a character on the song. I'm playing the boastful, dirty cop. Right. I don't know if it was you who came up with that language, but I liked it. I was always struggling to figure out the best way to describe that character, and I saw that somewhere. Was it AI? Who, I don't know if it was AI or you or someone, but I saw a boastful, dirty cop, and I was like, yes, that's a good way to describe it.
Was that in the write-up or one of the reviews?
It was somewhere, right? Because I think I was using kind of like awkward phrasing, like stereotypically antagonizing, or something like that. I'm like, doesn't sound too good. Boastful, dirty cop, because that's what it is, right? And I think
Right,
it, that kind of summarizes it well. This is not a representation of all police officers, obviously. It's a dirty cop in particular, and it's a boastful
right,
one. He's kind of rapping like a gangster rapper. And that was kind of the approach I took to the song. Like, what if you had a dirty cop who rap like a gangster rapper, right? Because sometimes they behave like gangsters. So I thought that would be an interesting take on it
right.
if they were rapping like a gangster rapper would rap. So the song originated because I had that beat and I was just freestyling, right? And the first words that came out were "Watch how I shine, homie," with the nine on me, and I kind of
Right.
laughed because I'm like, "What is this? This is like a gangster rap verse. I'm not a gangster rapper. This is not me." It just kind of came out and I thought it was funny, right? It was kind of entertaining to me. But I kept kind of going back to it and I started to think, how can I make that work? Because it sounded good with the beat. I was like, that sounds like a cool way to start this verse. It's not me, but you don't have to be yourself. You could play a character on a song. And I'm thinking, what kind of
Yeah,
character?
yeah, yeah.
And of course, in the news and in the public discourse at the time was what was going on with police misconduct and systemic racism. And
Right.
so I made the connection. Let's not just assume the role of a gangster rapper for no reason. Let's actually do it in the context of this issue, this conversation. And I thought it was actually a good way to further that national dialogue, right? So I just took it from there. I had those lines that just came to me spontaneously, and I just built off of them for the verse. And liked how it came out. I think I sent it to you. You had something for that, right? And then you kind of just took it and ran.
Yeah, and you actually sent me a message recently. I think it's like you realize your verse is like 36 bars,
It's 32 bars. It's
32
216. Yeah,
bars.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I don't know why I just kept writing in that point, but yeah.
yeah. So that wasn't something that you had already. You just wrote based on my verse.
Yeah, yeah, it wasn't something that I had already. So I don't know, the beat, I like the beat and the concept. And so like I just, just kept going. And usually, you stop a verse, like the very general verse is like 16 bars. Like that's
Right.
kind of
Mhm.
standard verse. I don't know what put me to keep going.
Well, probably inspired by the topic. Probably as you were writing, you
Yeah,
weren't thinking. Yeah.
certain topics you can just keep going and you have to
Yeah.
sometimes stop yourself.
Right.
Sometimes it's like it can be a struggle to get to 16. But
Right.
in other things, it's just like, yeah, you just keep going. You either have to curb yourself or just be
Yeah.
like, okay, just let it go, let it
Yeah.
flow.
Yeah. And sometimes you get to 16 and the story of your verse isn't done yet. And so
Right,
you can either rewrite it and say, well, this needs a stronger ending, or you can keep going, right? And say, well, she's
right,
not done yet.
right.
Yeah.
It's always, especially when writing that I I I don't know about you, but I always try to that last bar, like it has to stand out, or it
Yeah.
has to be a
Right.
finality to it. You know
Right.
what I mean?
Right. You want it to end, not stop.
Right. And it has to be something that either wraps it up or puts a point on it
Yeah.
or makes it to where you're like it's memorable.
Hmm.
to some degree. You know what I mean? Like there's something about it's that last bar. So if it doesn't end right, it either has to be rewritten
Hmm.
or you just got to keep going
I keep going. Yeah. And in some way, I
until
guess
you get to it.
it's easier, right, to not have to edit yourself down, because sometimes the hardest part is editing yourself down and compressing
Right.
and making it all accomplish everything you want to accomplish in that smaller space. But, if you have the room, if you think it's appropriate for the song, why not? Just keep going. And if you don't have everything you're trying to say in 16, but you like what you're saying, well, then do another 16 and do some more until you get there,
Right.
you
And
know?
that reminds me of a can't think of who it was. It might have been Busta. Busta Rhymes was talking about his collaboration with Eminem.
Mhm.
And he said he did his standard verse and he sent it to Eminem, and then M sent it back to him and it had like, like 30 bars, 40 bars or something. And Busta was like, "Oh heck no, you're not gonna do this to me." So he went and did a long
I
verse as
know.
well.
Yeah. I know what song you're talking about when they go back. Yeah.
Was it like Calm Down or something?
Yeah.
Something like
So
that.
there's also a video with Joe Budden and Joel Ortiz arguing in the studio. It's called Studio Beef. You can check it out on YouTube. And they're arguing over that very thing where Joe Budden wants to do a long verse. Joel's verse is 16, and he feels like Joe is trying to get all the shine or
Right.
rap longer than him. So Joel's thinking, well, now I either have to rewrite mine or spit more bars myself to match it, or he
Right.
wasn't feeling that. He actually wanted them both to do 16 and leave it at that. And Joe Budden was like, nah, he's like my verse is greater than 16 bars. I gotta say all the stuff. And so they were arguing over the length of the song and everything. And Joel was like, all right, it'll be a 10-minute Joe Budden song. Fine. He kind of gave in.
It's not, yeah, and sometimes it's not just about, it's not about taking the shine. It's not about, for some people it could be, but other times it could be about actually crafting a picture and having that story come out with the imagery that either it deserves or you think that, you want to paint.
Right. And I think that's really the point. There is no formula for good art. Right. And so that was, I think, maybe the philosophical discussion behind that, right? Where
Right.
Will was saying, well, this is how songs are done 16, chorus 16. And Joe Budden was like, listen, you're seeing a certain structure. He's like, I'm seeing a blank canvas on Pro Tools. We can make this whatever we want it to be. It doesn't need to be just because the beat maybe was set up a certain way. You can edit the beat to make it how to fit your vision. It doesn't need to
Right.
be boxed in. Now, maybe people take that to the extreme sometimes and get too abstract or experimental and becomes not palatable. So maybe there are limits
Right.
to it. But I think generally speaking, you shouldn't restrict yourself as an artist and say that it has to be done this way. No, you're an artist. Artists
Right.
create, they get creative, right? They don't just follow.
Absolutely.
It's not paint by numbers here.
Absolutely.
So, and then
So
we,
check it out.
yeah, definitely check it
Handcuffs.
out. The third verse, if you want to call it that, is a spoken word piece. And
Right.
maybe this is appropriate given what we just talked about, how we didn't get a third rapper on there or whatever. This is actually a poem, really. And I saw this gentleman. His name is Walter Kelly. He performed this when he was a student at Georgetown University, and I thought it was perfect. I think I just came across it, and it was just perfect for the theme of the song. And so I asked him if we could use that for the song, and he said, "Yeah." He said, "Sounds good. Just make sure you credit me and keep me updated on the song." And so we did. That was performed when he was in Georgetown. I don't know if he was a senior or what, but he went on, obviously graduated, and he got a job writing for Netflix. And he wrote, I don't know if you're familiar with the Netflix show Big Mouth. It was an animated
Absolutely.
show on Netflix. Yeah, he was one of the writers on that show. And then the spinoff, I think it's called Human Resources. He
Yeah.
was on that as well. And so pretty cool that he went on to do that, because when we were working on a song with him, he was a student at Georgetown.
Right. Yeah, that surprised me when you sent over the press release info and I was like, "Oh wow, he went on to do Big Mouth."
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I love that show.
So, yeah, definitely proud of the song, and I think it's going to be one of the more talked about songs, and I hope it does generate productive discussion.
Yeah.
So, as you
And
said, go
it's needed,
stream that.
especially in these days.
Yeah, definitely. So Friday the video comes out. Hopefully, people will check that out on YouTube. In the meantime, certainly stream it on Spotify or wherever you stream music. Like you said, a very timely discussion. It really has been for a long time, right? But things
And
keep
that's unfortunate.
right. It's unfortunate that we're still dealing with this issue, but things keep happening in the public eye that remind us as to why it is an important conversation, right? And I hope
Right.
we can all be mature enough to acknowledge that. In the video, you're going to see me holding up a sign saying if a large portion of the population believes it's a problem, it is a problem, because it's really ignorant to kind of just like shrug this off and say this is not a real issue when people are giving you their experience. They're saying we are experiencing this, crying out for something to be done, for at least this to be addressed in some way.
Right.
It really is irresponsible to just say, no, you guys are delusional or whatever, not even address it,
Right.
right? So it is something that needs to be discussed, and we can have discussions about policy and how we would change things and what we would do to address it. But hopefully we could all be mature enough to acknowledge that this is a problem, if nothing else but for the fact that there's a large segment of the population that feels this, that feels antagonized or accosted or in danger of their life, right? And in fear for their life. That's a real thing. You can't strip people of those feelings and of that reality. So
And the statistics back it up as
right,
well.
right. So again, it's not to be anti-police, certainly not. I have a great relationship with our local precincts here, and I think for the most part they've done a really good job, and I've even helped them out, and that's all good. But that doesn't obviate the need to have the discussion about misconduct where it exists, right? It's not a blanket indictment on all law enforcement, certainly not. But it's an acknowledgement that this is a real issue, and
Right.
like we said, we saw it in the subway recently, right? We're going to talk about that. We saw it with Sonia Massey not long ago, right? Why should that have happened? She was not a threat in any way.
Right.
Now, thankfully, the officer involved was indicted, right? Is going through the motions of being held accountable. We'll see how that ends up, but at least there's that. And I think that represents progress in some form, because in the
Yeah.
past, I think that was rare to see, right? It was rare to see
Right.
accountability.
Right. And
Yeah.
it's still quite rare to see. I believe recently I don't want to get it messed up, but the incident that happened with Sandra Bland
Oh yeah.
was recently the officers were found to have done nothing wrong.
Right. But wasn't that trickier because the evidence wasn't, I don't know if the evidence was destroyed or what it was, but it seemed like they didn't have video of what was going on, right?
I'm not exactly sure what was tricky about that. But they
Because then
went
they said that she
into.
committed suicide.
I'm sorry.
Was she the one where they said that she committed suicide? And then some people disputed that, her parents said that couldn't have been true.
This was, yeah, they said that she'd hung herself in her jail
Right.
cell.
Right. That's what I'm saying. There was no evidence that she was murdered, right?
Not exactly. I don't think there was any video for that, like showing
Okay.
her hanging herself.
No, but there was no
Was
evidence
it,
of
wait,
her
was that the
being killed.
character? Was that the case I'm talking about?
I think that's Sandra Bland. That was a traffic stop, right? And she ended up in a holding cell, and they said she hung herself in a hole. But people questioned whether it was
Right.
suicide.
No,
Yeah.
yeah, that's that case. I'm
Yeah.
thinking though but there was another case that just came out recently, and I thought it was the Sandra Bland case um where the police were found um not guilty.
Yeah.
You know what? I'm gonna pull back on saying it because I don't have the
Yeah.
details of
Yeah. Yeah.
exactly which one I'm talking about.
Right.
So I know it's something that came out recently. I thought it was Sandra Bland. It might not be. I'll have to look it up.
Okay. Yeah.
But it was within the last month or so.
Gotcha. Well, the Sandra Bland case was a few years ago.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, the case happened a few years ago, the one that I'm talking about.
Okay.
But yeah, I'll have to look it up and find out after. So
Okay. Well, let's talk about this New York City subway shooting, right? Because you have someone, I guess, who was alleged of fare evasion, jumping the turnstile or whatever.
right.
And we did talk about on Nuance before how there was going to be an attempt to crack down on that a little bit because of all the money the MTA was losing, right? And I think, mentioned this in the context of congestion pricing. And the big question was, well, if they don't get their money this way by collecting all these extra tolls, how are they going to do it? And fare evasion came up because we looked at how many millions of dollars are being lost every single year by people just not paying to get on the subway or the bus. So
Right. So they're saying they well the data that came out, or at least the news stories were saying it was like 700 million that they would lose this year on fare evasion.
which is crazy.
It's
So
it's
yeah,
unimaginable to think about.
yeah. By the way, can't they just make some structural changes so that fare evasion? I get on the bus, maybe it's a little bit different, but I'm
Right.
thinking the subway. Why make it so you can just jump over? Is that a safety issue? I mean, why not just have like that cage that doesn't turn until you put the card in or swipe it?
That would definitely slow things down. Um,
I guess.
that would really suck too. I hate those cages.
But it just seems so crazy that people can just jump it, and everyone just does. Not everyone, but a lot of people evidently do.
Apparently 700 million, or I
Yeah,
think more specifically was like 690, but
yeah, that's insane.
th maybe there could be some redesigns that could help.
Right, right.
Yeah.
So these police officers, I guess, were chasing this individual. This happened in Brownsville. They were chasing this guy who didn't pay the fare. He was going up the stairs. The
Mm.
officers were asking him to stop. He was refusing to stop at a certain point on the platform. And here's where it really went south. He uttered the words allegedly, "I'm going to kill you if you don't stop following me." That verbal threat would become a physical one as a suspect allegedly pulled a knife from his pocket. All right, so you've got the death threat and the knife. So things are escalating here, right, to say the least.
Yeah, yeah. Like
So
I pers but yeah, okay.
they gave numerous commands allegedly. Damn. And he says, "No, you're going to have to shoot me." So he's daring them. This almost sounds like suicide by cop at this point. Wow. He's daring to be shot as he's wielding a knife and threatening to kill them. And I'm trying to follow the story in this timeline here to see exactly if this is where they opened
Apparently they
fire.
tasered him first and it didn't
Okay.
work. And then they started shooting.
Is that on this ABC story? Because I don't see that here.
Yeah. So they gave him a bunch of commands. He said, "You're gonna have to shoot me." Then they went inside the train that had pulled into the station. They started shooting after the taser didn't work.
Okay.
So then it
When they
said
say it
that
didn't work, what happened? Do we have any information on how it didn't work, why it didn't work, what that means?
no. It just says that the taser didn't work. So I'm assuming that they hit him with it and it didn't take, or maybe they didn't get it in the right spot. I don't know. It
Right, right.
doesn't clarify that.
I'm wondering the extent to which he was subdued, if at all, by it, right? I mean, to say it didn't
Right.
work, did he keep trying to run away? Did he keep threatening them? Did he keep waving the knife? Did he sit down? I mean, what did he do that didn't work, right? And there's different
Right.
levels of that. I mean, maybe
Yeah,
he
there's
didn't stop,
multiple.
right? Maybe he didn't stop and put his hands up at that point, but what did he do? What was his reaction? That's what I'm curious.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah. Did the electrodes go in to where it could administer the electricity?
right.
Don't None of
Was he
that is
still
clear
making
there.
threats? Was he still acting threatening after the taser?
Right. So that none of that is clear, at least from this article. That's something that definitely will have to come up in court.
Yeah.
Uh, so then
Also,
after that,
so
oh,
here's
go ahead.
just thinking as a lawyer here and really scrutinizing this. How far away was he? Because they were chasing him and he wasn't stopping, right? When
Well, no,
he's
but this part took place inside the train car.
okay, so they followed him onto the train car. The door shut. They're locked in the train with him now.
I don't know if it had shut at that point, but they had gotten to the train car. So according to the article, it said the confrontation moved inside a train that had just pulled into the station, and that's where police opened fire after tasering the suspect didn't work.
Right. So I'm curious about
It was
this
a small
scenario.
space now.
Right. It's a small space. Obviously, other passengers are in the line of fire, as we saw. But to what extent do the officers feel threatened, right? Because if they're shooting, they're using deadly force, their life needs to be in danger, right? Objectively and subjectively, it needs to be a matter of self-defense, no? Or maybe defense of others. But
It
if he,
should be.
well, I'm saying legally though, right? Yeah, I understand, but maybe they don't always act within the bounds of the law. That's a problem.
Right.
But I'm thinking legally here. If they're using deadly force, they're saying that the defense of themselves or others was required, right? And so I
Right.
get it. threatening to kill them, holding the knife, not reacting to the taser, continuing to resist. Yeah, all those things work against the suspect. But when you're talking about shooting someone with a gun, you really have to have that level of basically you have no other options or someone's going to die, right? And I'm just wondering if that's really where it was.
Of course, neither of us were there. We've only got the report from the news article, but personally, from the impression I get, I don't think it was there. To me, it seems like another police overreach, and the reason why I say that is because um, of how they went shooting. So after the taser didn't work, they started firing, and the bullets were in the car and on the platform. The suspect was hit, and two passengers and a police officer was hit.
Yeah.
That tells me that there's not a lot of control going on in the firing, and that to me indicates it's more of a frantic situation on the
Well,
behalf of the cop.
but it could be frantic if, for example, the suspect lunged at the cops with a knife. Sure, that's going to be frantic, and you would expect probably them to start firing at that point. But I'm not seeing that information in here. I get he had
Right.
the knife, he pulled out the knife. Okay, that's bad. Yes, but to rise to the level of it being acceptable to shoot him, I think he needs to really be attacking them with the knife, and I'm not seeing that here.
And listen, there's obviously was more than one cop there.
Yeah,
So like even if he has a knife, you're supposed to be highly trained
right.
individuals to be able to subdue somebody that has weapons.
That's what I'm saying. They can grab his arms. They can surround the guy. They can tackle him. There are things that you can do. They can tase him again just because the tase the first time nothing happened.
Yeah,
Then
why didn't the second cop
you can't tase
shoot a
twice.
taser?
They can't do
Um,
anything. So yeah. So and again, maybe some information is missing from this article. I don't want to say that the cop is definitely guilty here. I'm just going off what I can see
right,
online so far, right? I'm
right.
not seeing something that says that they lunged at him with the. Remember the ozone park case, and that was controversial too. We covered that on here a while ago, where there was a mentally disturbed kid in Ozone Park who allegedly lunged at the cops with scissors, and even then we were questioning it. It's just a pair of scissors. They had to kill the guy for that, but
Right.
you did have in that story at least the act of lunging, the act of actually physically attacking the cops with the weapon. That's different from pulling a knife. And again, what kind of knife was it? Was it a switchblade? Was it a Swiss Army knife? What kind of blade was it? But pulling a blade out of your pocket and saying, okay, saying I'm going to kill you, but was he really in the vicinity of the car? Was he really, that close? So we said, okay, they're in the train car together, but was he able to actually, and was he actually trying to stab at them? Like, I'm not seeing that part.
Right. That's not, at least from the article that we're reading, and so we're going to be clear about that, at least from the
Yeah.
article that we've looked at, that details there. And, there might be more details that have come out later from police investigations and more journalist investigations.
Right.
Um, I don't think, but just the scenario itself, I don't think it warranted pulling out the gun. Now, even if he did have let's say he's got the knife and he is lunging at the
Mm.
police officers, even in that situation, I don't think it warrants pulling out the gun because we're on a train that's
Yeah.
obviously got other bystanders on it because two other people were hit. That's reckless to me to pull out your gun and start
Well,
firing in that
well,
case.
and there's a difference also, let's be clear, between pulling out the gun and firing, right? Because
Right.
if the guy's holding a knife at them, you might expect the cop to hold their gun and say drop the weapon or something like that as a warning. But that doesn't mean they have to start firing, right?
Right.
If the guy, because that's like maybe the next step in the escalation. If they're threatening the guy with the gun, maybe he'll drop the knife. Maybe he'll surrender at that point. Then now, if he's got guns on him and he's trying to kill them with the knife, all right, then maybe you expect him to get shot. But there are levels to it, and it seems like the article at least is skipping through a lot of these levels that would make sense.
Right. So it definitely doesn't seem like it was warranted. So we mentioned there was the suspect is at the hospital, and there was a 27-year-old woman and a 49-year-old man that were just passengers on the train that both got hit by the bullets, which would be the police officers' bullets, and
Mm-hmm.
they weren't doing anything. They were just,
Right,
and one of them was the 49-year-old man was shot in the head
right.
and is in critical condition. So is capturing a fare jumper worth putting other people in danger to the point where just a passenger going about his day was shot in the head by a police officer's bullet
Yeah. Well,
to where he's in critical condition.
I think the answer is no, definitively on that. I think where it
And
gets more dicey is at that point he wasn't just a fare jumper, right? He was someone now with the weapon who was threatening to kill police officers, and so you
but
can't say,
again,
well,
was he
he's
was
just a
he
fare jumper. He did according to this. He had the weapon in his hand and he was making
Yep.
threat saying, "I'm going to kill you if you come near me." So we can debate how credible those threats are. Kind of, and again, we don't know what kind of knife he had, and there are details that are missing here.
Right.
But just based on those basic facts, I think he becomes more than just a fare jumper at that point. Now he's someone who has, and who knows who else he's going to endanger with that weapon, right? He's making death threats
Sure.
at this point with a weapon. So that does elevate it to that degree, at least. Again, it doesn't necessarily mean that bullets should have been fired, especially considering the fact that, as you mentioned, other people now end up getting shot. So if the purpose of this is to protect lives, save lives, well, it seems
Right.
kind of counterproductive to open
Right.
fire in this train and actually shoot other people.
Right. And one of there was three people that got shot. Those two just citizens that were just riding the train and another police officer. So this to me tells me that it was the police officers were not in control of themselves in this situation, as they should have been.
And I hate to say it, but reading the article here, it almost sounds like an ego thing where
Right.
the suspect says, "I'm not stopping. You're going to have to shoot me." And it's almost like a challenge. I mean, and I can't speak for the psychology, the psyche of these officers or whatever, but it reads almost like he's daring them, and they're like, "Oh, how dare you dare us? Like, you think we won't do it?"
Right.
You know?
So yeah, I think it's I would say to me, I would have the police officers investigated for discharging that weapon.
Sure.
However, the reports or the statements that have come out from the NYPD is they're blaming the knife wielding suspect. They call him a career criminal with more than 20 arrests. They're saying that they make no mistake, the events that occurred on the platform are the results of an armed perpetrator who was confronted by officers doing the job we asked them to do. To me, that's the spin.
Right.
That's spin.
Oh, well,
I understand
it
that they're
isn't
doing the
factually
job.
inaccurate yet, right? I mean, okay, so far that is true, right? An armed
Right.
perpetrator who was, what was he doing to the officers? Threatening?
This
Was that
says an armed perpetrator who was confronted by officers doing the job we
right?
asked them to do.
And that is true, right?
Very
The officers
crafted.
but that is true. The officers were asked to stop people from fare
Sure.
evasion, right? So yes,
Absolutely.
that is true. But what it's trying to drive at is that basically it's okay. And we see this, by the way, a lot. And I think this is part of why this remains an important topic to talk about. When the coverage comes out, it always seems like it's spun in a way to suggest that it's okay to kill the person or shoot the person, to harm the person because
Right.
of their history, because of who they are. And they never
Right.
want
And
to,
that's irrelevant.
right, exactly. They never want to look at the actual incident and ask the hard questions about, in this particular instance, forget about what he might have done in the years before or whatever. In this instance, who was at fault here? It's almost like they're saying it doesn't matter. They're trying to say it's irrelevant who was at fault because this was a guy that we shouldn't like in the first place.
Right. And you're not going to know he had 20 arrests necessarily if you're just starting to stop him for fare jumping, right? Unless they knew who the suspect was. It's not like you see the guy and you're like, "Hey, this is the guy that we've been looking for and we know what he's capable of." There might be a little bit of a different nuance there, but I don't know if that's the case
Right.
here.
But even then, right. I mean, okay, I can see public sentiment being different at least. I'm trying to really think in terms of as a lawyer, right? What's relevant and what's not to this. And I think you really
Right.
have to focus in on what happened here. If you want to
Right.
talk about public sentiment, yeah, maybe if this was a serial killer or something like that, people wouldn't be losing sleep over the fact that he got shot.
Right. But even then, you don't want bystanders
Right.
getting hurt as well.
And
Now,
then also,
according
I'm
to
sure people look, this is America. We talked about in the US, we as a country seem to love our guns, can't get away from them. But I'm sure other countries will be looking at this thinking this is why police officers shouldn't have guns, right?
or they should be better trained.
Yeah.
Um, so, and apparently, according to the article, it's possible that the round that struck the police officer was his own bullet that ricocheted off the inside of the train.
Well, well, yeah. Who's else? Who else's bullet would it be? They're not saying the suspect fired back, right?
No, no, no. Well, there was more than one officer, from what I
No, so
understand.
so they're saying that the cop who got shot might have been shot by his own gun, not by another cop's gun.
Right.
Gotcha.
It's possible.
Possible. Well,
So,
there's a comment here talking about Mayor Adams' responses because there's a headline in the
oh,
Gotham.
I can already imagine he's gonna be
So here's the
swinging off
headline.
the cops' nuts.
Here's the headline in the Gothamist. Mayor Adams praises NYPD for quote unquote great level of restraint in subway shooting. The mayor
What?
commended the NYPD's response to an alleged fare evasion in Brownsville on Sunday. The incident left 4 people injured. And so that was the article. The comment here, and again, this is a commenter on Instagram, says, "Every day this clown is in office, we run faster towards our doom." Talking about Adams.
Great restraint?
Great
Like
restraint. So I guess in
two
his mind, the cop
bystanders got shot,
should have
and
shot more
one's in
bystanders.
critical condition. That's not great restraint.
Yeah, yeah.
That's recklessness, in
In
my
his mind,
opinion. That's reckless.
more should have been done, I guess. Um,
Yeah.
there you have it.
You know, there was a guy on the train in Tokyo that was wielding a knife, and he was actually threatening passengers
Mhm.
um on the knife, but no bystanders were hurt. No bystanders were hurt in police dealing with this has to do with kind of what you mentioned. I think part of it is ego, part of it is that adrenaline, part of that is knowing that they're the way they're trained is to get that guy no matter what.
Mhm.
And that's a problem.
You
That's an issue.
mentioned, yeah, you mentioned the incident in Japan with the knife. I know some people who are very pro-gun are going to say, well, doesn't that prove that guns aren't the problem? Because people can be violent with all kinds of weapons. But I think you also, in describing the story, proved why it does make a difference whether the weapons are knives or guns, because you see a lot more destruction being done by the
Right.
gun.
Right. So, I mean, people were hurt on the train by the guy stabbing, but well, I guess when he was swinging it around and whatnot. But it wasn't where cops were, and cops still took him down without shooting other people.
The cops took him down without shooting, but the cops there don't have guns, right? Or do they?
They do. They
Okay.
didn't before, but they do now.
Okay.
Some of them do, especially in the city like Tokyo. Some of them will.
Okay.
So,
But they didn't use the gun. I guess, it's less
right.
of a gun culture. They're less likely to just reach for that gun there.
Right.
And also, to be fair, they're less expecting the people that they're dealing with to have guns, right? So it's not
That
ingrained
too.
in them that right that the criminals are going to be out there with guns.
Right. I think that's a fair point to bring up.
Yeah,
Whereas cops in the States, they don't know if it's more than if it's more than just a knife or more than just threats. There could be deadly weapons on that person. So
right,
that's a fair point that has to be brought up.
right. So you mentioned, and I'm going to do this tonight. I didn't get to it last week. I'm going to do it now that I'm thinking of it. You mentioned that the possibility was that the gun used to shoot the cop might have been his own. Remember
Right.
last week we were looking at the data on guns coming into New York, and we
Right.
saw a big chunk of them were quote unquote police guns. I do
Right.
want to contact the state troopers to ask for clarity on that point. Say, what do you mean by police guns? Are they? You're saying what was like a third or a quarter of all guns used in crimes were police guns or just guns recovered by the state police? That was kind of vague. It didn't really make sense to us when we looked at the number. So I want to get
Right.
clarity on that point and see what that means. And then hopefully I can have a bigger conversation about the data and try to get more data from them as they're supposed to be provided.
Right. And I imagine like this it's not funny, but this would count as if it was his gun, or even if it wasn't, if it was one of the other cops, then this would probably count in those statistics as a police officer being shot with a police gun.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Although it was a staggering number, right?
It was,
I think it was
yeah,
like a quarter of all guns they said were characterized as police guns. And again, these are guns that were recovered in the commission of crimes in New York, right? And
right.
saying about a quarter of them they were calling police guns. We were saying so a quarter of all guns used in crimes came from the police. It didn't really make sense. And so again, I want to get clarity on that point. It could be guns that were recovered by the police, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, and to me, that number, like you said, is so staggering that it's something that really should be looked into because that raises a whole host of questions. I mean,
Right. Well, we, again,
are
we
the
need
police
clarity on that
committing the
point.
crimes?
I want to know exactly what that means before we
Right.
start giving our thoughts and judgments on it. Like, let's really see what they're talking about here.
Yeah, yeah. Like I said, so it should be,
Because
yeah,
this
interesting
came from the
stuff.
state troopers, so it's possible that they were making a distinction between local law enforcement and state law enforcement. Maybe these were guns that the state troopers found as opposed to the NYPD, for example. Like, I really don't know. But all said on that, and again, this is why the data provided should be more comprehensive than this little chart, because the chart,
Right,
they're trying to fit all the information in a one pager, and so they're abbreviating a lot of stuff, and some stuff is
right,
not clear what they mean. This many guns were police guns. Well, what does that mean, police guns? It didn't make
right.
sense to us that all those guns were actually owned by or used by the police. It's possible, I
Right.
guess, but that seems very strange.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like I said, that could raise questions. Is it police committing the crimes? Is it that police guns are being stolen
Right,
somehow?
right.
Um,
Are they ending up in stores or being resold, repurposed somehow?
yeah, and how is that happening if that's
Right,
the case?
right.
So
Definitely
that
worth
needs to be
looking into.
clarified for sure.
Yeah, so I'm going to send that email off to state troopers right after we finish here.
Yeah. So,
So, all right. Well, I guess we can move on to our other topics here. We did a
yes,
poll
sir.
last week, right?
The poll last week, yes, we had a poll last week. So we went and did a shout out to James in the chat asking about the debate. The
Yeah,
poll last week was a preemptive thing because we did the show before the debate happened, and so
right.
we were asking, who do you think won the presidential debate between Trump and Harris? And unsurprisingly, uh, especially given the site that the poll was posted on,
Mhm.
unsurprisingly, 96% thought that Harris won and 4% thought that Trump won.
Okay. I'm going to ask you something, Jay. If you had to grade the candidates' performances, give them a letter grade, what would you give them?
I thought I thought, hmm, I'd give her a B plus, and then him, yeah, I'd give him an F.
Yeah, I would actually do the same. With her, yeah, I think a B. I actually was thinking B minus, but I'll go B. Part of that though is because it's a debate and your performance is judged against the others, and because she was by comparison was so much better,
Right.
it's hard to give her a low mark, right? But in isolation, I honestly didn't think she had the best debate. I think she did fine. She did respectable, right? But I think she for sure would have lost against Biden 4 years ago. I think she would have lost against Obama. She would have lost against McCain. She would have lost against Romney. She would have lost
Mm,
against Bush. Well,
really?
maybe not Bush, but most of the major presidential candidates, I think that performance wouldn't be good enough to win. I think it was because Trump had such a bad performance, she came out looking good. Now, some of this is to be expected. It was her first one-on-one debate, right? Her first debate in a general election. And yeah, she did. I guess she did the vice presidential debate. Did she debate but yeah, she did debate Mike Pence, right? That was the fly on his head last time. I remember that was Harris. All right, so she did that. But for president, her first one, and candidates do, I think, tend to be nervous and not really on their game that first time. And I think this was no exception. She
But what
came
do you
off,
think was missing? Yeah,
she
go ahead.
seemed, okay, so she seemed very nervous. She didn't seem very composed. She wasn't answering a lot of the questions. And I think part of it has to do with what we talked about on here last week, that these are topics that she was prepping for, and she was basically going to have a canned answer for all those topics. And that's fine. You can stick to your talking points, but I think to really answer the question, you may have to deviate a little bit. You still give the majority of the same answer, but try to direct it at the heart of the question. That might require changing a few sentences around or just modifying it a little bit. But there's a line you can cross where it comes off like you're just reciting a canned answer as opposed to actually try to engage with the question. And I think that happened with her a couple of times. One of them was when they were asking what she would do differently than Biden on Israel and Gaza. She never gave an answer to that as far
Right.
as this was. She just gave her opinion on the war.
Right.
Okay,
There were
that
a
needs
couple
to,
of times, yeah.
yeah, that needs to be in there, but that wasn't what they were asking you. And I thought she definitely could have tightened that up, right? I
Right.
think, again, I think maybe first debate jitters, maybe over preparation, maybe just sticking to the script, maybe realizing she didn't have to do too much. I don't know, but it wasn't
Or
a
maybe just not wanting to
right.
give specifics on that because it's
Maybe,
a big hot button issue.
yeah, but again, it doesn't take a whole lot to answer that question. You can,
Yeah.
I think. See, here's the thing, especially on a question like that, when they're asking what you would do differently, I get that it's difficult as a politician because you are the vice president and you want to say good things about the president that you're serving
Right.
under. And so it's hard to answer, well, this is where he failed. This is how I'm going to do better, right? You feel like you're
Right.
betraying the president. So it's difficult. It's difficult to do, but she's running for president. She should be able to do that, right? And there are subtle ways that she could do it. She can basically say, look, I was involved in some of these negotiations. I saw what worked, what didn't work. We're going to deviate from that a little bit. We're going to use what we learned. We're going to, there are certain, and again, not going into great detail. You don't want to compromise the mission or anything, but there are a couple sentences at least she could have thrown in there to show that she was actually answering the question at hand and not just sticking to the script. So maybe that's a bit of a minor critique, but
Right.
watching it, I was like, all right, listen, she was fine. She did fine. She did fine, right? It wasn't like I was blown away by her performance. It was just that his performance was so terrible. She looked so much better by comparison.
Yeah, I mean, so it sounds like your one of your biggest critiques. I mean, of course, it was there were a couple of questions where she just kind of danced around, which unfortunately it happens a lot with any candidate.
Mm-hmm.
But the other main critique seems to be more of a personality issue.
Yeah, not being very composed. I think in the beginning her voice was shaking a little bit. She seemed nervous. She didn't seem like she was ready for prime time, ready for the big stage, right? She didn't have that
Mm.
commanding presence. She kind of seemed like she was a little scared to be there, to tell
I
you the
think she settled in though.
I think she did. I think you're right. I think after the first couple questions, she kind of fell into her groove a little bit, and
Mm.
Trump actually fell off the rails. It was really interesting watching those
I think
first,
she pushed him off the rails.
but she didn't do too much. I mean, maybe she said a couple of things, but the bar is that low. That's the thing. Like we're giving her so much props for stepping over such a low bar. She didn't have to. What did she say? People left your rally and boredom. I just set them off. I mean, that's crazy. We're going to give her.
But
She's a genius for saying that. I mean, come on.
no, but I think that was strategic though. See,
I'm
I,
sure it
I look
was.
at it
I'm sure
I
it
look
was.
at it where
But it's
she
also
she
kind of
knows.
obvious. It's also not like any one of us could have done that easily. You know what I mean? It's not like she's the great debater for coming up with that. Any one of us could have done that.
Yeah, but I think she does deserve, or her and her team in the prep does deserve credit for taking that approach because they know, even though for people in, looking at the debate, they don't care about his rally size, and
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't really matter as far
Yeah,
as the issues. But what it did was push him to that point where he was going to go off script, which is where you want him to be, because
right.
then he's going to come off as a crazy person and it's
Sure.
going to invalidate some of the things he says, and it makes her look even better.
Yeah. And I
And it
think
shows the craziness of him, which
right.
is what actually happened.
And as a an attorney, and not just an attorney, but someone who has experience with actual court cases, right? She knows some of those tricks. I'm sure some of those even psychological
Absolutely.
tricks. And
She
so
did. She used it a couple
she,
times.
she, she did, right? But to be fair here, to be transparent, I think he fell off the rails even before that. The first couple of questions, I was actually nervous. I was sitting there thinking, oh boy, this is where Democrats lose because you can go back and watch, maybe, I don't know what it was, first 5 minutes maybe. I was thinking he is having a strong performance for him. He's doing what
I
he is
thought the
supposed to
same
do.
thing.
And she seems shaky. She seems like she doesn't belong on stage with him. Her voice was shaking a little bit. She just didn't seem confident in herself. She seemed insecure. She seemed like she wasn't ready for that primetime role of being the presidential nominee. And I thought that comparison was like, oh, people are going to come out of this thinking that Trump wiped the floor with her. They're going to say that. They're going to say he destroyed her. And I was nervous. I was legitimately nervous until it got to the abortion question. And he just completely went berserk. And I think that was without her having to prompt him. I think he just on his own went off the rails from the question.
And you know what? I think that it's funny you said that because I was thinking that in that first 5 minutes,
Yeah.
those first couple of
Yeah.
responses from him, I was thinking he's sounding much more sane,
Right.
much more competent. He's giving off an answer that seems to be like a real answer. It was
Yeah.
like the first two, maybe the two responses that he gave, and he was
Right.
like dead serious. He
Hmm.
wasn't like using the crazy out there voice.
Yeah.
Like it was like in the pocket. And I'm
Right.
like, is this like he must have been preparing because he knew he was coming against a litigator or
Right.
something in that
Right.
regard. And
As yeah,
then,
if you're
yeah,
judging that like a rap battle, and that's the first round, you give that round to Trump, whether you like him or not, whether you agree with him or not. Just in terms of the performance, I think
right.
he had the edge. He was definitely coming off better for what he's trying to do than her at that point. And again, I was nervous about that.
Yeah.
But then it got to the abortion question, and what was he even saying? He was talking about they're going to execute them after they're born, and he just went crazy. And she
And
really
it
didn't
was,
have to. All she had to do at that point was speak coherently, unlike Biden, right? Just basically sound normal, and you win by default then. And that's, I think, what happened.
well, also to keep poking that, to keep poking, because now you've seen he's shown his weakness. He's not able to keep composed like he's trying to be, and keep poking that to expose more. And then we saw it really blow up, I think, was when everyone was really like, what? When he was like, they're eating the
Oh, yeah,
dogs. And it's just out of nowhere.
right. Which, by the
Um,
way, has been admitted to be not true, right? The woman who
right.
posted that now says that that's not true. That's a hoax that I guess she made up.
Right. The governor of the state has said it, the
Yeah.
mayor, the police have said this is not true. But they keep reiterating. So here's the thing is post debate, he was in an interview or post debate or an event. And not only did he say they were eating the dogs and the cats and the pets, he also said they're eating the geese. He
Well,
doubled
he's trying to
down on it.
pivot. He's trying to pivot from dogs and cats to birds. And I'll say this: I saw a video from Howard Beach because a lot of people in Howard Beach, I guess, are pro-Trump and they're trying to prove that this is true. But there was a video from the we talked about the animal sacrifices on here.
Right.
There was, I guess, a fisherman who caught a seagull. And I just see this myself. I don't think this is AI. I think this is a real video, but some of the context isn't there. But from what you can see in the video, there's a fisherman who has a seagull in his hands. He's holding it by the neck. And there's a woman who confronts him and says, hey, what are you doing with that bird? And he's like, oh, his English is not that good. I caught bird or whatever. And she was like, hey, that's not your bird. Give it back to me. Give it back to me. And so she took the bird and then she kind of ran away with the bird and set him free. So I'm sorry, little guy, go off. So the comments were saying, well, what was he going to do with the bird? And people are saying, well, they snapped the bird's neck and eat them. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, but you did at least see a guy holding a seagull. And so maybe some of that is happening. In the Chronicle of one of the Queen's newspapers, when they were covering the recent reports of animal sacrifices at Charles Park and by Jamaica Bay, they mentioned so many animals that were found, carcasses that were found, right? And they mentioned not just pigs and goats, but I think they mentioned dogs, cats, and some others as well. So a lot of people are using this to say, like, see, the stuff is all true. Now, obviously, there's a difference between that, which is disgusting in its own right, and snatching dogs and cats from someone's yard and eating
Right.
them. That's a different thing. And we saw
Right.
no evidence, right? That's actually been admitted to be a hoax. But just to kind of put everything that's out there, someone was or multiple people were making reference to these other animals, I guess, being involved in the cruelty of various forms.
Right. And so I think, she gets, I mean, he went off the rails on his own, but she gets points for she was helping to push him that way and he took the bait. I mean, talking about his rally size, he has
Right.
this,
And
it's
that was
going to
funny
be
because yeah, she threw that in there and then she had other things to say, and you knew when
right.
it got to him, he would ignore everything else and go immediately to the rally size.
Right.
Yeah.
And that is, it's something that people should know. Like, listen, this is the guy that wants to be president of the United States,
Yeah.
and he can't focus past, the rally size of one of his events. How's he going to deal with, Putin or these type of negotiations if he can be that distracted, if he can be that manipulated?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so we already have these questions from the time when he was the White House occupant and how he was played with, by other foreign leaders. And so, yeah, it's something that needed to be put on display.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And then she did what she had to do in doing that, and I'm sure she was over prepped. It's funny how people say she was given the answers. First of all, that's an admission of defeat, right? When Republicans on social media are saying that she must have been fed the answers, they're admitting that she gave better answers than he did, right? Because otherwise
Absolutely.
they
Right.
would say that. Um,
And Trump said it too, even though he said I won, but she
But I think
Like,
he
no,
was.
you're
I
talking out
I
of
don't know
both
if that was
sides.
the chicken or the egg, like who said it first, because oftentimes he just repeats what's on social media, and sometimes he
Right,
says
right,
something that makes them all say. I don't know, but people were saying that, and then they had these conspiracy theories about the earpiece. But I guess she was wearing Tiffany earrings, but they put it side by some audio device earring. They said, look,
right.
But here's the thing: these were not hard questions. They were
No, they
very
weren't.
straightforward questions. We know she was preparing, and my critique is maybe she over prepared or basically memorized her answer to all of these questions to the point where it came off a little bit stiff and rehearsed sounding and didn't exactly answer the nuance of the particular question. Because what it is, like they'll ask you a particular question about foreign policy. For example, what would you do differently than President Biden when it comes to the Israel and Gaza war? Okay, now you can go into your prepared answer on the war, sure, but also put in your response to that question. Like, don't forget to answer the question, which I think she might have done. So I think, but that's what was happening, right? These questions were being asked about these major, large macro topics, and she was going into her talking point, right? Her rehearsed or her prepared answer on that topic broadly. And it's probably all you need to do in a debate, especially against someone like him. Again, the bar is not high here, but that's what you were seeing. It wasn't like these were very complicated issues. In fact, when you debate for president, you actually, I think, have it almost easier in the sense that you're not going to be asked about these issues on a micro level. It's not going to be like
Right,
compare and contrast your view on abortion, between what Nebraska is doing and what West Virginia is doing,
right.
like you're just speaking in such general terms. You're just saying like this is what I think it should be. It's very you're not going into the nitty gritty here. You're just
Right.
speaking with very broad strokes, and so
Most people could have predicted what was going to be asked.
everyone, yeah, there's really, and in fact, I thought they were going to ask about guns, and they didn't, and or crime, right? I think crime and guns was left off, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah,
After the school shooting, I thought a lot of the
yeah,
conversation was going to be about the guns that we're seeing in the country, and I didn't get that at all. But so I'm sure she had an answer ready for that too, right? It's these are just very hot button topics, and there aren't that many of them. What is it, like 7 or 8 things that they're going to be asked about, and you
yeah.
are prepared to speak on those things. I mean, it's not
You
rocket
should be.
science. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
if
not rocket
you're the
science.
president, you're
And
running
for
for
them
the
for
presidency.
someone to say, well, she was given the questions. I could have done that last week. I could have given you a list of questions, and people would have what? Oh, he's a genius. He guessed the questions. Like, no.
Right, right.
And you're
In the
and by the
chat,
way, you're stumping for president. You should be talking about these things already.
absolutely. And you should have not only should you be talking about it, you should already have an opinion formed on it. You should be
Right.
ready to answer these things.
Right.
In the chat, they ask about the issues. Everyone knows that. Absolutely. Like
Yeah.
it's just
I like it's so ridiculous to me. I don't understand what people thought. Are they even thinking this through? She got the
no,
questions. That's you know what I
no.
used to think that way when I was a kid. I think I might have said this once before. When I was a kid watching presidential debates, I was so impressed because I thought, wow, look at these guys. They're asking them like anything under the sun, and whatever they come up with, they got a brilliant answer for it. Then you get a little bit older and you realize you know what they're going to ask you and you know what you're going to say. There's no
Right,
surprises here,
right.
you know?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, um,
It's just so
but
strange, right? And to not be prepared for Trump not to be. And we again last week the reporting was he might have been having some discussions at Mar-a-Lago about some of these issues, but he wasn't really preparing the same way she was. I think that showed he was underprepared. She was overprepared.
yeah, yeah. I mean, he was definitely underprepared. But he's always underprepared. He doesn't even if I think even if they prepare him, like he goes off script anyway. So
Yeah, yeah. The
he
RNC speech,
definitely,
he rambled for a long time instead of sticking
yeah.
to the teleprompter.
And that was another thing. The one thing that I did like is that the moderators did try to fact check him a couple of times, on
Yeah,
air,
right,
and even about the eating the pets, about the post-birth abortions that just isn't happening because that's not abortion at that, it's murder. That's just
right.
so that's not even
And he
happening.
messed
And
up. By the way, this wasn't correct. I guess it's not a big point, but he said it was the former governor of West Virginia who made that comment, and it's actually the former governor of Virginia. I'm familiar with what goes on in
uh,
Virginia. It was the former governor of Virginia, who I think was a neurosurgeon as well, who made the comment about after the baby is born, the infant will be put aside and it will be kept comfortable, and a decision will be made at that point. But I do think, while a dumb thing for a governor to say, that was taken out of context. I don't think he ever intended to say that that infant would be murdered post birth. I think he was
Right.
speaking very specifically about babies who were born with deformities and who might not be viable, who might be dying anyway. And he was saying that they would be put aside and a decision would be made about palliative care. But we can keep
Right.
the baby comfortable, and not that they would actively murder the child at that point, but what kind of health care will be delivered? Are they going to try to resuscitate it, save its life, or are they going to let it die? That kind of thing, as opposed to actively murdering the baby.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
So,
And also,
yeah,
that
I
would
think
be
that that
not
should
a
be
smart thing for a governor to say, because he was asked about abortion, and again, I don't know the entire context here, but that that is a confusing answer when asked about abortion, because that's like a different topic he's bringing up in a very
right.
specific case. And
And
so,
it should be, yeah, it should be clarified when you're talking about those things.
yeah, yeah. And so Trump likes to harp on that comment as if it's policy, or as if the Democrats support this notion
Right.
of murdering children after they're born. And that's not the case. So clearly, yes, very good that that was corrected at the debate by the moderators. But
Right. They
I do
did let
want to
him
also,
ramble though.
yeah, but yeah, exactly. And that's the thing. Some people are saying that they were biased against him, but really, they gave him a lot more leeway than they gave her in terms of speaking
Yeah.
out of turn. He spoke a lot more than her, and there were times where the answer was already given by both sides. One side would give their answer, the other side would respond, and then Trump would be given a second shot to keep going.
Yep.
She was never given that second shot. Like
Right.
he was able to speak more, often more often than she was. Like even when
Right.
the question was already answered. And so I actually think that they were kinder to him in that sense.
And that's part of his strategy always is to be that is to just keep talking and keep that attention. And if you noticed, he I don't know if there were any questions where he let her have the last word, even if she was supposed to be the one speaking last. He always had to have some kind of follow-up, some kind of rebuttal. And I think that's part of his overall strategy all the time, even when he's in interviews or anything, is to try to get that last 2 cents in there.
Yeah.
Um, and you notice his other, right off the bat, his first somewhat trying to have a power move was not going over to shake her hand. He made
Oh,
her come to him
that was
if
her
that was
power
going to
move.
happen.
That was her. I don't even know if he was thinking about that, to be honest. I don't know what his thought process was, but it looked like her power move in that she went over to him. And so she looked like a stronger leader at that point, more gracious, right?
For me, yes.
And she made him react to what she was doing.
Right. For me, yes. And I see that point of view. Like for her, it's like, yeah, I'm gonna go over there because you're not even a threat to me.
Right.
I'm gonna be the adult in the room.
Right.
This is,
By the way,
however, from his point of view, I
yeah.
believe it was, I'm the King Trump. You have to come to me. And we see that when we've talked about his weird handshaking style, right? When he shakes people's hand, he pulls them into him,
Mm.
right? Makes them come to his space. It's not a meeting in the middle. It's I'm dominating you. You're coming into my space. So I think from his point of view, I'm not going over there to shake your hand. I'm not meeting in the middle. You have to come to me if you're going
Right.
to do it.
And he wouldn't even look at her. But she also,
Right.
if you saw on 9/11 when they were at the memorial, she actually did the same thing then. She went to him and shook his hand, and he reciprocated. He shook it and smiled. Hey, good to see you, whatever. But she initiated that there too.
Right. And to me, like I said, and you probably have the same view. To me, it looks like she's in control because
Yeah.
when you are facing an obvious person that is an obvious adversary, and you have no kind of feeling about going over and shaking their hand or whatnot, you seem to be more in control of the situation because it's like you're
Right.
not, as much as you're stewing about me,
Yeah.
I, I'm not
And that's
even.
yeah,
Yeah.
and that's probably planned. It's probably a bit of an illusion, right? Because we saw with the body language and from her voice, she actually probably didn't feel that much in control. She seemed very nervous and shaken. So she probably said, or maybe her advisor told her, I don't know, but they were like, let's create this perception that you
Right.
are the strong one here, right? Let's play it that
Right.
way. And I think that did come off, right, in that moment.
Yeah. Yeah, it's going to be seen by two different views, but I think, yeah, So I thought, to me, I thought it was a power move on her part, but him attempting to make it a power move on his part.
Yeah, I didn't get the sense that he even put any thought into that.
Does he put a thought into anything?
Well, because like I said, he wouldn't even look at her. I think he wasn't even planning on shaking her hand or looking at her or engaging with her. I think he just thought he was going to walk to his podium, give his answers, and leave. I don't think he had it in his head. Oh, I'm going to make her come and shake my hand. I don't even think he thought about shaking hands.
I just think that's his normal. That's his normal demeanor
Right,
when he interacts with
right.
anyone, is to
And,
try to
and
make
that's what
them
it is. I
come to
don't think he
him.
really thought a lot of this through. It seems to be consistent with both the reporting and what we've seen and heard,
Right.
right, ourselves. He didn't seem to really prepare for it. I think even when asked about it, he said something like, hey, listen, I know how to talk about these issues. It's nothing new to me. Like he wasn't even really giving it that
Right.
much due consideration, whereas she certainly was, right? I mean, she was like training
Right.
for it like it was a title fight. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, yeah.
And,
So,
you
you
know,
know,
and to be fair on that point, I guess the last thing I can say on that is you do often see that when it comes to the first debate, and we're hearing this might be the only one because I guess he's refusing it as of now to do it again.
absolutely, I could tell he wasn't going to do another one.
So, but usually, but the first time a president, right, an incumbent president, or in this case, I guess a former president, meets someone who has not been in the White House, it's often the case that the challenger, so to speak, does better because the president thinks that they've got it under control. They got the experience. They've been there. They've been doing the job. They know what they're doing. It's nothing new to them. This is almost like
Right.
they don't take it as seriously as they should. Whereas the challenger tends to take it very seriously and
They're
sometimes,
hungry.
yeah, is hungry. And that comes out. That we saw, for example, in that first Romney Obama debate, where most people said Romney won the debate, right? We saw that when Biden challenged Trump. By the way, similar results. If you look at the poll that came out after Biden versus Trump, similar results when you saw Kamala versus Trump. It was like 65 to 25, something in that range. So it usually is the case that when you have someone who's been president, that first time they sleep on their opponent, and their opponent comes out like you said, hungry.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I could have predicted from as soon as that ended, there wasn't going to be a second debate. He's not going to go for a second debate.
that makes him look weak, even weaker in my opinion.
But for us, yeah. But for him and his followers, he's gonna lean on, oh, I was treated unfairly. They gave her the answers. Why were they fact checking him and not fact checking her? And
Oh,
so,
okay. So do you think he'll say, "I'll do it" if it's on Fox News?
um, I don't know. He might.
Yeah,
Would she do it if it was on Fox
right.
News?
That's the question, and I'm sure there'd be some discussion and negotiation there about what the parameters would be. But I don't know if I was him, I would. I guess this is why we're different, right? If I was him, I would be hungry for another. I'd be like, ah, I know I could do it. That was a letdown. I know I could do it. Give me a second chance.
But you recognize the difference in the performance. He
Yeah.
thinks he killed it,
Does he though? He's saying that, but does he really
at
think?
least in the public.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know if
Yeah.
he really believes all that stuff that he says, but
I don't know.
I'll say
I
this:
think it,
have you
yeah.
seen? I don't know why I'm being shown this, but on TikTok, and we'll get into the TikTok discussion in a second here. On TikTok, I'm being shown golf clips of him playing with a very famous pro golfer, and he comes off more gracious in those golf clips than he does anywhere else.
Mm.
It's very strange. I saw a clip of this golfer, I guess, beating him in a hole, getting a hole in a fewer amount of strokes. I don't know what the term is there, but doing better, outperforming him on a particular hole. And he's giving the guy props, as of shaking his hand. Like, oh, I thought my drive was good, but you just rendered it meaningless. And he's like actually admitting that he's losing at something. I'm like, wow, he actually can do it.
Yeah, I'm still in awe that it's even this close.
Yeah. Well, presidential elections tend to be, and people vote not based on a debate performance or any of the other things, right? They vote policy for the most part.
And there was none of that. I mean, listen, um, it's going to go on deaf ears on his followers, but on the healthcare issue, when they kept talking about the healthcare, and he's talking about Obamacare is a failing thing and all this and that, and we're going to have a plan that's so great, and they called him out on it. Like, okay, what's your plan? Like,
Concept.
what is your plan? I mean, it's been 9 years, dude. You were defiled the White House for 4 years. It's been 4 years of Biden's presidency, and then
Right.
you were campaigning before that. So about repealing Obamacare. So it's been 9 years-ish of you saying that you're going to have a plan and you've produced none.
Yeah,
And then he
yeah.
says,
And
I
where
have
that makes a
concepts of a
difference,
plan.
where it makes a difference is at the margins, and that actually is important, right? And so while most people have their minds made up and no debate is going to sway them, and and that went both ways, right? Biden has a bad debate, people are not going to turn against Biden for the most part. Same with Trump for the most part. But in a close race and in a very polarized country like we have, it makes a difference, like, at the margin. So even if a small amount of people, like, there was a poll saying, I think 9% of Republicans said that they would no longer vote for Trump after that debate. That's
Mhm.
okay. It sounds like only 9%, but that's still a big difference when it comes to a very close race.
That's
Every vote
huge. Yeah.
counts, especially in these swing states, right? We see the margins in some of these states, right? By under 100,000 votes in a state.
Right.
So yeah,
Mhm.
so if you can get 9% of Republicans, or if you even get 5% more independents, and anything, these things that you think, well, how come only it's moving such a small amount of people? Maybe
Right.
it is a small amount of people if you look at all the people, but when you realize that any small movement makes such a big difference in the results, then it really is consequential.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And so yeah, hopefully, we'll see that it is effective and
Well,
we don't have to be subjugated to
well, the Taylor Swift endorsement, I think, as I was telling you, I think that actually probably makes a bigger difference in the numbers than the debate.
um listen, that's completely true. I mean, she has a massive fan base among the young people who are stereotypically the ones who don't vote as much. And this could be huge. That could be a big game changer.
Right.
Someone that, so we'll see how that plays out.
I think they
Hopefully,
said in the first day that she posted that link to register to vote, 400,000 people clicked it. So,
hopefully that translates into votes.
yeah. All right. Well, speaking of game changers, before we wrap up, I want to talk about TikTok because this case is in appeals court now, and constitutional arguments are being made by TikTok. And I find this interesting. Of course, we know that a law was passed, right? That TikTok had to sell to an American company or would be banned in the US in the beginning of next year. Well, they are suing to challenge that, and they're saying that it violates their First Amendment right to free speech. Um, they make some interesting arguments here. One of the points that they make is that, while the US is claiming that it's doing this to fight back against authoritarian regimes like China, but by blocking such a popular social media app within the US that millions of people use to use their speech, the US, they're saying, is actually acting like an authoritarian regime. And so they're calling it hypocritical.
Right. And you know what? There's a lot of, talk on different sides of the argument. Um, I think there are credible security and safety concerns with TikTok, even though TikTok is owned by a Chinese company, and
Right.
what they usually cite is there is a law in China that um, companies that are Chinese companies have to give the government basically any information that they ask for. And so that would include any data they've taken in. Now, for TikTok's part, the American version, the TikTok America, supposedly has set up a system, and they think they call it Project Texas, where they keep all of Americans' data in America so it doesn't leave the country, so that it wouldn't be subject to that request by the Chinese government. On
Part
top
of,
of that,
I was
I'm
going to
sorry,
say,
go ahead.
part of the argument here, though, is that they're alleging that TikTok is is being used by the Chinese government to show Americans propaganda and try to inspire their elections and their thinking, basically. So it isn't so
Right.
much.
And
I
there's
see it's
there's
not
credibility to
the
it.
right. It's not the data security as much as it's the propaganda aspect that's being emphasized here.
And that's what I we had talked about it before, but I think a lot of people go into the safety security concerns of it,
Mm-hmm.
but to me it's the propaganda that is the more important point to look at, because they can decide what gets through, what doesn't get through. They can limit the amount of things. For
Right.
example, in the presidential election if they want to put in the algorithm that are going to reduce impressions of videos that are mentioning Kamala Harris or pro Kamala Harris by 10% as opposed to
Yeah.
Trump. That can have a significant
Right.
impact.
And it's
And
funny
we've
that you say
seen,
that. And I don't know if this is the reason why, but I look at my performance of the TikTok videos that I post. And I think my lowest performing one is Michelle Obama speaking in favor of Kamala at the DNC. It seemed like
mm,
TikTok did not want that to go out at all. It might be because I shared a clip that's been spread by a lot of other people. So maybe it's like, oh, you're just recycling content. I don't know why it did
right,
that, but it did get my attention that that one that I put out wasn't spread like the other ones were.
right. And also being able to use that voice to influence or to motivate and move people in the United States. And there was an example of it, and I'm not sure if you can look at it as malicious, but it showed the potential, was after the TikTok president had that interview with Congress. He went on TikTok and he posted videos of it, but they also had like ads that were running in there saying contact your congressman, contact your senators because this
Mm,
is what's happening, right? That shows that they have significant reach and can
mm.
impact people. Even if it's just saying contact your senators to talk about this, that can be concerning for a company, period, but then for a company that has foreign roots with a hostile government.
Sure. And an example that I would see cited a lot was you would see, especially when the war in Israel started, you would see, well, with between Israel and Hamas, you would see on TikTok a lot of images of dead Palestinian babies. And
Right.
is some people have speculated that that was the Chinese government's attempt to drive that wedge in the American population. And, for example, a lot of the young people that you saw at the colleges and whatnot were protesting in favor
Mm.
of Hamas. They thought maybe that originated from what they saw on TikTok.
Mm, mm.
So,
So this is, like you said, that law was passed where they're supposed to sell to an American company, which I can understand the skepticism in that because some of the people who have expressed interest in buying it are connected to Trump.
mm,
Some of those folks have been expressing that interest, which would give them another propaganda machine themselves. It would just be a homegrown propaganda machine.
yeah. But there
And
are,
so that's a concern.
yeah. And here's the thing, all these things are concerns. I guess the question is, should we be litigating it? Should we make it a law that they're not allowed to operate, given that it is so ubiquitous, given that it is a private company? We understand there are concerns with the Chinese government being in control, right, to large degrees. But these
Well,
are
let's be
private
clear on that.
actors.
The
Yeah.
Chinese government isn't in control. The
Well,
company the company's headquarters is in Singapore, which is not China, and the government has a smaller stake in the company.
but it still is China where there isn't as much of a dividing line between private enterprise and governmental power, right?
Right. For
So,
TikTok's position though is that in
right,
Singapore. The company's in Singapore.
right. When they're saying that, they're saying the company's in
TikTok
Singapore.
Singapore, ByteDance is in China.
Right. No, right. But they're actually saying that ByteDance is a Cayman Islands company, but the judge didn't seem too impressed by that argument. The
Right.
judge was saying, well, technically, yeah, maybe it's headquartered in Cayman Islands, but it's subject to Chinese control. That's what they're saying. That
Right. So there is definitely some
even if it's,
influence
yeah,
there, yeah, of
yeah.
potential.
And so the argument against TikTok is that even though you say that you're not run by the Chinese government, it is a Chinese company. And they're saying these are Chinese engineers in China working on the
Right.
code, working on the algorithm. And so
Right.
you can say, well, we got companies all over the world, but it still is China really running the show. That's what
Right.
they're presenting as their argument.
Now, this is
So,
not the first time this has happened, and I think it's should also be noted. Grindr, the dating app that was marketed towards I don't know if it was just gay men, but they were originally a Chinese company, a Chinese app, and it was forced to be sold to an American company to keep operating in the US for, again, same thing, security or concerns,
I
data
think
concerns.
there's a real question there as to whether we in the US should be forcing these
Right.
business transactions to occur, right?
Right.
Why are we not letting business do what it does, especially when, as we talk about, social media is seen in the US as the new town square where everyone
Right.
exercises their free speech rights? Are you not curtailing a lot of free speech in the US by shutting a platform like this down? Now, some people will say, well, it's just one platform. If TikTok goes away, something else will replace it or whatever. But nonetheless, this is a platform that millions of people use, and they built up these followers. And, a lot of people
Right.
have whole businesses built around this and everything,
Yep.
and whole livelihoods are at stake. Do you just say, too bad, we're going to shut all this down because we want it to be an American company? I mean, is that not infringing on the rights of all these Americans who are using this and, like we said, really utilizing it for their free speech activities?
Yeah, I mean, that's the question, one of the questions that's going to have to be debated there. I mean, I'm sure there are arguments that can be made for and against.
Yeah.
If this is a propaganda company that's going to hurt Americans and hurt the country, then is it curtailing free speech of the users, or is it protecting the users from hostile threats?
All right. Yeah.
Um,
And that void will be filled, right? I see a lot of people take that stance as well. Like, listen, all right, if TikTok goes away, you know what's going to happen. There's going to be something that pops up probably within a few months of that happening. That's going to be similar. It's going to behave in a similar way, right? It's going to encourage the organic growth the way TikTok does. It isn't going to be limited to just your own followers, but you can go viral on it. And
you
they're
think?
trying to emulate that technology, I think, pretty quickly.
Well, I mean, that's what Instagram and
Right.
YouTube been trying to do,
Right.
and have some success in some ways. And then, I mean, but not just Instagram and YouTube, but Facebook integrated it into the
Yeah.
Facebook platform as well. So there are alternatives, but it's not exactly the same. The algorithm is not the same.
Right.
You have a better chance of getting more organic exposure and going viral on
True.
TikTok than any
It's
of the
true.
other
It's
platforms.
true. And I didn't understand that until I started using it. And I'm like, wow, this thing really is powerful.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, I think there are probably other ways to go about it than forcing the company to sell. And that makes you wonder, if you're a foreign company doing business in the US, at what point are you going to lose your company or be, attacked for losing your company potentially? That
If
would
you're a
raise some
foreign
questions.
company, yeah. But I mean, it's not like there's a habit of this happening with a lot of other foreign companies, right? Chinese ones in particular.
Right, Chinese. Well, as far as I know, it's been TikTok and then Grinder, which was also a Chinese company.
Right.
So either there's going to have to be you know, some more regulations put into
Yeah.
place so that you wouldn't be trying to force people to give up their company,
Right. And they're,
or
yeah. And here's the thing too. They're arguing that it isn't just about all their American users, right? They're saying as a company, their
right,
right to free speech is being violated because you don't have to be an American citizen or even an American resident to enjoy
right,
free speech within the US, right? They're saying,
right,
listen, even if we were in China, we're allowed to direct speech. Your constitution prevents you from saying we can't speak. So what are you talking about?
right,
You know?
right. So we'll have to see how this plays out. What's your feeling? Would do you think TikTok should be forced to sell to American company, or should it just be able to retain ownership, but maybe some caveats?
Yeah, I would want to see actually more of the arguments because you can see it on both sides. And
Right,
I want to see why the US is saying that this is so pressing. I get the arguments on a large level, macro level, but I would like to dive deeper into that, look at the data that they have, and look at why they're actually saying that whatever free speech rights are implicated here are overcome by the interest in ensuring that this is not run by China in any way. Because I think there is an interest there, but it's a matter of balancing it out. Because I do think there are free speech implications as well, and also I do have concerns about the government interfering with private enterprise. So that's part of what I would want to see is the connection between the Chinese government and the company, right? How much
right,
influence really are they exerting? I mean, these things are all, I think, important to look at. So it's hard for me to say definitively without actually looking at that deeper. But my gut feeling is I don't really like the idea of forcing it to sell absent more compelling data to show that it's that needed.
right,
With that said, I wouldn't be surprised at all if it did happen, if the court said that this was constitutional, that the government met their burden of showing that this was a compelling interest to the extent of whatever free speech rights there were having to be overridden. That wouldn't surprise me at all if the end result here was that TikTok gets banned in the U.S.
Yeah, yeah, they've been trying for years now. I mean, they started this back during Trump's presidency. They've been trying to ban TikTok. Um, I would be, I wouldn't be surprised if it happened.
Yeah.
Um,
No, I mean, but we're
not really.
further down the line than we've ever been, right? And if you look at
Yeah,
this appeals court, it doesn't seem like the judge is too sympathetic to TikTok's arguments from what I'm looking at.
right,
So,
right. And so
TikTok, for
that's
example,
going to be an
TikTok
issue.
in the court case says, "Oh, we're not really a Chinese company," and the judge says, "Yeah, right. I don't believe you." Like, you know what I mean? Like, it seems like the judge is saying, "Nah, you guys um, are not credible. You
Right.
say that you're a Cayman Islands company. Nah, it's under Chinese control." It's like the judge seems to be putting them in their place a little bit when they try to make these arguments. And so, to me, that's a sign that maybe this is going to come out upheld, right? TikTok is
Yeah.
appealing this, right? This they originally went against TikTok, right? And they're trying to get it overturned. So
Right.
uh,
One of
maybe
my
that was successful.
concerns, one of my concerns with the sale is who's going to buy it, and will it turn into
It might not. It might not happen. Maybe there is no sale, and TikTok just gets banned, and then someone else has to come up with a different app.
well, that's what TikTok said they weren't going to sell. And so if
Yeah,
that happens, then then it just would be blocking access to in the United States, which would be very, I think that would set kind of a precedent as well, because the US doesn't generally block
right.
apps like China. That's exactly what China
Yeah,
does.
yeah, yeah.
And so that in itself is something
And
to
that's
really,
why, yeah, that's why, again, my gut feeling is I don't really like this. I don't like how it feels as an attorney, as someone who is a constitutional law enthusiast, right? It kind of rubs me the wrong way. But I
yeah,
always say that these rights are not absolute. You do have to weigh the interests here. And maybe there is a compelling interest to override those free speech concerns. Maybe. But,
yeah.
just without having that data, without having that information, I don't really like the way it smells.
No, I don't. And then if they did sell, which they said they wouldn't, but if they did, I'd be concerned about it turning into a extremist propaganda platform like
Mm.
Elon Musk has turned Twitter into. So that concerns me as well. So
All
I
right.
guess
Well,
we'll have to see how it plays
yeah,
out.
let's put the poll question out. And we want to ask if people think it will be banned. So let's separate this from what you think should happen. What do you think will happen? Right? Because we said this is in court now, this is an appeal. So the poll question of the week is: do you think TikTok will be banned in the US?
Isn't doesn't the law already state that they have to sell or it will be banned by like
Yes, I
January or
believe
something?
I believe that's what it is. They have until January, if I'm not mistaken. And so TikTok has sued, and that's why it's in court now. They're trying to get this law declared unconstitutional so that they don't have to sell or be banned.
Right.
Yeah.
Uh, I hope it doesn't.
Yeah.
For
Maybe for selfish reasons too, right? I mean, I think
right, right, right.
it's going pretty well, and I'm seeing the growth on there already, and I'm using it. I'm using it as a tool for marketing, and there really isn't, like you said, there's YouTube Shorts, which is good, and Instagram Reels,
Not
other
as good.
platforms are trying to emulate. It's not as good. It's not as robust as what TikTok does, and maybe those other companies will have to pick their games up in the absence of TikTok. I don't know, but as of now, it is the strongest app when you're trying to get organic growth and reach more
Yeah.
people, and get more eyes on what you're trying to do.
Absolutely,
So,
absolutely. So,
all right, well, we'll
all right.
leave it there for now.
Yes, we'll leave it there for now. And got a bottom line this week?
Ooh, what's the bottom line? I know we talked about the bar not being very high, but Harris being able to go over it. What's funny? This is an aside. This is not the bottom line, but as an aside, a lot of people make a big deal about how to pronounce her name, right? Kamala versus Kamala. And I think it's hard for people who grew up wrestling fans because of the wrestler Kamala that, everyone was a fan of in the 90s. So you've been seeing that word and saying it as Kamala for all those years. Now you're being told it's Kamala. And so there is an adjustment there. All right, Kamala. But here's the thing: I never see anyone beef over the pronunciation of the last name. And in fact, if you pay attention at the DNC, when she introduced herself, she pronounced her last name Harris, and her own husband, when he came out, pronounced it Harris. And no one said, "Well, how come her own husband is saying her last name wrong?" They focus on the first name, but not the last name.
What was the difference?
She says Harris, like hair,
Harry?
Harris, and he says Harris.
Oh, well, it's probably just her. It's I don't think it's the same as Kamala versus Kamala. I think it's very different.
I don't know,
Yeah.
Scala
Now
versus Scala,
I'll
Scala
be
Scala.
I'll be honest that I have struggled with getting her name right because more commonly we would see that as Kamala,
Right.
right? There's even there's a comic book character that just had a movie and Netflix series, and she's Kamala Khan, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that has always stuck with me. And I tell you what, it probably wasn't until this debate where it finally stuck in my head that it's Kamala.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I would mispronounce it quite often because it's uncommon, but I
Right.
think it's still important to make that effort to pronounce
Sure.
it because, people still make that effort to pronounce, Schwarzenegger. And
Mm-hmm.
that's very much not an English name
But
that is
that's a
very
last
used.
name again. Harris versus Harris. So does it matter if it's
It could
first
be a
name?
last name thing.
Does it matter if it's first name or last name? But that's her first name and
Could
his
be.
last
You know
name.
what I mean? I think it has to do with, I think the part of it would have to do with we use first names to address each other.
Right.
We don't
Right.
generally use the last name.
Right.
So
Right. That's
it's
true.
more of a disrespect if you don't get the first name right.
That's true. That's true. Because people, like I said, people say Scala, people say Scala, and I kind of let them say whichever way they want to say it. I say Scala because it's closer to the Italian pronunciation. But
Right.
I don't trip. You can say it however you want. Now, if someone
If
is doing
someone called you Mickle,
that, if someone right, or if someone was mispronouncing your name on purpose because they thought they were making fun of you or something, that you might feel a certain kind of way. I think some people
right.
have that concern with Kamal, although I'm not exactly sure why that is. I think it's because it's going to remind them of the wrestler. I don't really know why that's offensive. You know what I mean? But I think some people look at it like it's racist to say it the wrong way.
Well, it can be when you take into account that other foreign names, usually non-black names, or usually when you talk about European names, people
Mm-hmm.
make the effort to
Make
say
the effort.
those right, even
Right.
though they're not in
Right.
English, generally
But I
English
think
names.
the intent has a lot to do with it.
Right. And then it becomes also if you are being purposefully defiant on it. There was
Right.
an interview with, I think it might have been on Fox or one of those, and there was a right-wing commentator on there, and they kept calling her Kamala. I mean, they call her Kamala. And so they were doing it wrong, and the other host they corrected her and said it's Kamala, and she's like, no, Kamala, and they're like,
No,
no,
Kamala.
and
Yeah.
then everybody in the table were like correcting her, like you're saying it wrong, and she's basically saying, I don't care, I'm gonna call her what I
Yeah.
want to call
Yeah. It's just, yeah. And so it's odd to me that people would behave that way. And it just is cruel and mean for no reason. It's just weird. It's just an odd behavior. It's strange.
It's
It's
the
bizarre.
same type of thing that
Yeah.
made them make sure the same type of people who had felt that they had to say Barack Obama's middle name every time they said it
Trump
because
still
they
does that.
want to come off a certain way.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. No, I
Yeah.
get that. I just don't know how Kamala versus Kamala comes off a certain way inherently. It's just a matter of mispronouncing it just to be rude, I guess. But I don't see
Yeah.
how one sounds more other than the other. You know what I mean? It's just stressing a different syllable of the same word.
Not kowtowing to what people
Yes.
expect, I guess.
Yeah. I
Like
guess.
she's so not important to me. I'll say her name however I want. I'm
Right.
above her
Right.
type of
Right.
thing.
Yeah, and I guess you should not expect better from people who just make up nicknames and call people whatever they want. So
I suppose, yeah.
yeah. So I don't know. Bottom line, I guess there are not very high bars to get over. Maybe we shouldn't be applauding people when they get over a low bar. Maybe we should just be expecting it. Maybe the bar should be raised a little bit higher. And this way we wouldn't have this conversation of who managed to avoid stumbling over the low bar because that's kind of a silly conversation to be in.
Okay. All right. All right. And you can find us uh everywhere podcasts are available and YouTube at Nuance Show, Instagram as well. Not TikTok. We don't even know if TikTok's going to be around, but Yeah, hit us up in the comments and say what's up. And shout out to everyone in the chat.
Yes, thank you all for checking us out. As always, we've got work to do. Catch you next time.